Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar Implementing a Lean Learning Approach at Randstad. To introduce myself, I'm Oliver Craddock from MindTools, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. The webinar is intended to be about 30 minutes long, and the idea is that we have some conversation with two people from Randstad, and we have the opportunity for you to ask questions at the end. If you'd like to ask a question, please add it to the Ask a Question box on the right-hand side, and we will get to those at the end. And if we don't have time to cover them all, we will reply to you afterwards to give you an answer. Most importantly today, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers, both from Randstad. They'll both be talking to you today. There is Jessica and there is Michelle. They are clients of ours and we've worked with them, and this is the story we now like to tell you about the success we've seen. In terms of what we're looking to cover today, this is what we're aiming for. We want to talk about the context of learning today as how we see it at MindTools, and how that then flows into the challenge that Michelle and Jessica have seen at Randstad, on that, how that led to them defining their lean learning journey. Jessica is then going to talk to you about the role of MindTools in that, and then both Jessica and myself are going to talk about the story so far. And we're going to finish off with some key takeaways, and as I said, the opportunity for you to ask any questions. So in terms of the context, in terms of learning today, what do we see? I think the key thing we see is a change in expectations. People expect things differently to how they've expected things before. They bring a greater level of expectations into the workplace. This quote we've used before is an incredible summary of that, in terms of people are expecting a dynamic, self-directed, continuous learning environment and learning opportunities from their employers. What we've actually done at MindTools is done some research as well into what people want and how they want to learn. And the fundamental key thing is that people want control. They want learning to be self-directed. They want the opportunity to shape that learning themselves rather than it being fully prescribed to them. So how does that mean they will actually learn? And this is a great diagram from Degreed in terms of showing the difference between L&D-led learning and self-directed learning. In that L&D-led learning does not have the frequency of intervention and frequency of contact that self-directed learning has. People instantly go to Google. Think about our own behavior. We're all consumers, and MindTools have talked before about the rise of the consumer learner. People are going to web search, they're going to their social group, and they're going to instant resources that give them access to the knowledge they need at that moment in time. That isn't to say that the L&D-led kind of training and learning doesn't have a place, but it's to make sure that we get the blend right. In terms of how do people therefore want information to be given to them, some other research we did show that people want access to the resources when I need them above anything else. They want that feeling of immediacy and relevance. They also want learning to be more individual to themselves, and they also want the way that learning is delivered to them to be changed and to be really relevant to the way they work and live. So really, that is kind of how we see the concepts of learning, and it's a great setup for Michelle to go on to talk about the challenges she's seen at Randstad. So Michelle, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Ollie. Hi, everybody. Wanted to tell you our story at Randstad, and it begins back in 2015. As a global leader of staffing and HR solutions, at the time, I was the head of talent management for North America, and our North America CEO and CHRO challenged us to look at how we were delivering learning and development in North America, think about it differently, and become more innovative in our delivery methods. This was a wonderful challenge for us to have, especially since it was coming directly from the top. So next slide, Ollie, and we'll talk about our challenge. So they came to us and said we need a more innovative approach, and that was even a little bit before some of the research that Ollie had shared with you. But we're a very geographically dispersed organization with over 1,500 locations across US and Canada. So we needed to evolve from the blended learning model we were already using with a very heavy face-to-face component to even more innovative in our blended learning approach, and the just-in-time delivery to really meet learners where they are, literally in their local workplace, in their branches, but also figuratively relative to where they needed their own professional development direction to go. So next slide, please. So what did this mean for us? So back in 2015, again, this was the team got together, Jessica, myself, we pulled a group of us together and said, so what does this mean for us? What do we need to be doing to be more innovative? And we looked at things like easy access to learning tools, bite size at the time. It was still, you all may remember the sushi approach, but basically bite-sized approach to learning and development was an up-and-coming feature. We were looking for a broad range of topics that our learners could access that was also engaging and relevant. So this was the challenge that we had ahead of us. Want to advance the slide, please? Around that same time, there was a reference here to Slalom Consulting. There's an article that I had read that said that learning is going lean. We actually had some other lean initiatives going on around the company, so I thought, well, strategically, maybe this is something we ought to consider. So frankly, we had been very, very proud of the content that we had. Our learning team was fantastic at delivering the training. We had a lot of proprietary content that was created just for us. And we had been creative by adding some articles and videos as part of our curriculum. We were pretty darn proud of the way we had created. But after reading this article, I realized that we were actually very traditional. And some of you looking at this slide may actually relate to this traditional instructional design. So next slide, which shows actually what the article informed us on. And they were calling this the lean learning approach. So the lean approach was really looking at, it made sense for us because it's looking at the way we delivered learning and development, the tools we were using. We were looking to implement new methods and new tools such as gamification, updated videos, and incorporating social aspects. So because we were so ingrained in our traditional approach, we did have a lot of face-to-face training, in-person training. We used webinars quite a bit, but a lot of travel to in-person trainings, mostly in Atlanta and Boston area. What we needed to do was look at different tools and different approaches for deployment of our learning. And by the way, one of the ways that we took our business case back to Linda and Jim, our CEO and CHRO, was that telling them we needed a new investment in tools and methodologies if we're going to do this. We actually created a business case for those of you who need to do that. Interestingly enough, we looked at how much would be saved by reducing the travel cost of our in-person delivery. And this was how we were able to get investment in the new technology. I think that's always a challenge for our L&D colleagues. And so next slide. So our learning journey, and can move to the next slide, really begins with the alignment of whatever tools we had. We needed to create effective learning that used a lean mindset, optimizing our current technology, but also looking for new partners that could support our innovation. So just a quick run through, as I said, this started in 2015. Interestingly enough, we had to align our own delivery tools internally. We had several LMS instances that needed to be consolidated as a way of maximizing the use of these new tools and shared content. So it was quite an effort and quite a journey. But strategically at the time, we were only using our LMS for deploying our proprietary content and tracking attendance. So we really needed to solve this issue. That's when, as Ollie mentioned, we were thinking about different ways of deploying learning. We began to search for a partner who could provide that relevant content, that broad range of topics, the high quality curation of content. As you can see, That's when we partnered with 2015 with Mind Tools, and also Jessica and the team started using that flipped classroom methodology to make our in-person sessions more meaningful. Over time, you can see we've continued to evolve our L&D strategy, and now taking these new approaches, new tools, and partners even globally across Randstad. As last year I stepped in to become head of global L&D, we're also bringing the same strategy along, bringing Mind Tools and other partners along with us to locations outside of US and Canada. UK, India, we find Singapore as well are a little bit ahead of the curve, but some of our other colleagues are just starting to activate content curation and just starting to look at different ways of deploying learning technology tools and ensuring the return on investment from these. As far as the story goes, next slide, Ali. Our challenge continues to be, how do we continue to look for integrated innovation using that lean mindset? So we're always looking for innovative learning solutions. We're enhancing our social collaboration and gamification. Jessica's doing a fabulous job with our L&D team of looking at ways of sustaining and reinforcing learning through these tools. Looking at curated content, definitely the just-in-time performance support is really driving a lot of our changes and our investments. And then I'm really putting a lot of emphasis this year on ensuring the return on our investments. The best way to do that is to ensure utilization and adoption of these new tools. So we have some clear measures of our ROI through utilization. So I'll turn it over to Jess now. She's going to talk to you about how we're driving utilization across the US. Over to you, Jess.
All right, thanks, Michelle. So if we move on to the next slide, you can see, and when we stepped back and looked at it, we knew our employees, and Ali, you can advance to the next slide. We knew that our employees wanted content in the moment. We live in an age of instant gratification, like Ali mentioned earlier. I can guarantee the majority, if not everyone listening on today's call, has their cell phone within arm's reach, and you're on your computers listening in. So at this very moment, you're connected to multiple devices. You can Google answers to questions or ask a question on a social site and get instant collaboration. Or you can even ask Siri or Alexa a question and get an immediate response. So our employees were no different. So in this post-digital age, we needed a partner that had a wide variety of high-quality content that could be accessed on demand whenever and wherever they were. Mind Tools provided more than just articles for people to read. They had a wide variety of quality material in the form of articles, videos, self-assessments, and book summaries. So we liked that variety. We also appreciated that the content is refreshed constantly, and they have the ability to create customized learning paths that were unique and relevant to Randstad. So once we launched, we were often given the feedback from people that said they liked Mind Tools because it always had something else to offer. And as you go to the next slide, you'll see that at the time of our initial launch, we had an open library concept. So employees would access Mind Tools through a deep link on our LMS, and they would go directly onto the site. The feedback that we received initially was that it was overwhelming. There were hundreds of resources when you searched for a topic, and quite frankly, people didn't know what article or resource was best for them. So then we had to move to phase 2, which was our customized learning journeys. So we did this by the different initiatives within Randstad, and also we looked at the roles within Randstad and created custom paths based off of the competencies on each role. And so we worked with our partner at Mind Tools, and we said we don't want any more than 5 resources per competency or per initiative to really target this down. We knew once we got them into Mind Tools, they would start searching for other content, and that was fine. But at least if we could provide that targeted entry point, that made them feel more comfortable. So even with that shift, our utilization was really not where we wanted it to be. So in phase 3, we started to implement mind tools into our learning programs. So we would either put it as content as pre-work, or we could even have it as post-work, or even supplemental reading. So we had it just implemented as a blended approach in our learning programs. And with that addition, we did see a much greater adoption to the platform, which was exciting for us. We even had some success stories where we had one participant in our program. We used the Eisenhower matrix model for prioritization. And she was so impressed by that article that she brought it back to our team, and they all read through it and really thought about what are the things that we do on a daily basis that is not important and it's really not urgent, but we do it because we feel like it needs to get done. By going through that article and really going through the steps that it recommended, they were able to prioritize their workday much better. And the person said they saw the most immediate impact from the program from that one article. So it was really great to see that adoption, not only within the program, but then people bringing it back to their locations and implementing it. And the funny thing is that same person said she started to bring it home, and so now them and their spouse are also using that matrix to really prioritize their home life as well. So at the tail end of Q4 last year, we started our next phase of marketing, and we initiated monthly newsletters that we sent out through our intranet. We reference articles for all employees, and we also created a leaders corner. So there's a Mind Tools article just for leaders. And we also post articles on our social sites internally as well. So I am excited about this new phase, but I would also say that we're still pretty early into that journey in phase 4. So you might be wondering what's next for us. So if you go to the next slide, I'll step back and say at the time of our launch, our goal was to really expand the access for our employees to have that on-demand content, as Michelle had mentioned earlier. And we realized at the time that it was okay that we didn't have tracking, so honestly, we didn't implement single sign-on. And as we evolved over the past few years, it's become pretty clear that we need that single sign-on. There were times that people had some accessibility issues because there were deep links in our LMS, so if they weren't logged into the LMS, they couldn't access Mind Tools. So that there's some friction there. And we wanted to eliminate that so that the number of clicks somebody would take to be able to access Mind Tools would be lower. So that was one of our key initiatives to get to single sign-on. And then as we're partnering with Mind Tools, we realized that they're going to be adding additional functionality to have personalized learning for each individual based on their role and based off their browsing history within Mind Tools. So when you log in, you can imagine having recommended resources that say, hey, Jess, it looks like you could use this resource. And it reminds me a lot of, going online shopping. I'm sure all of you are familiar with, going to purchase an item online, and then it says, oh, here's some other recommended merchandise that you might be interested in. So very similar to that approach that we're very excited to partner with Mind Tools and to be able to offer that in the future as well. So Ollie, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Jessica. I guess my role here is as well to talk about, off the back of what Jessica's talked about in the journey that Randstad and Mind Tools are going on, is some of the success we've seen so far. So if you remember the phases Jessica talked about, from the open library quiet launch through the customized learning journeys, the blend into the wider development programs, into phase 3 and into phase 4 now, which we started, as Jessica said, in Q4 in terms of that kind of more advanced engagement through internal marketing. In terms of what the success that Randstad have seen, it's kind of multifaceted, and that's probably no surprise to any of you. But the key we've seen over that journey is that the momentum is really building. And that's building as the experience of the individuals within Randstad is evolving in terms of how they're being engaged within that. So you'll see that from phase 1 to 2 in terms of utilization, that the utilization doubled. So the impact of making it more customized and more personal, and rather than being a very blank open library, we talk about that a lot with different organizations. You have to work harder than just giving open access. In terms of moving to phase 3, we saw again a significant step up in engagement and utilization in terms of 4x the first phase and twice as big as phase 2. As Jessica talked about, it made the programs that she works on and her colleagues work on and kind of have pre and post activity to really drive them forward and keep that repetition and reinforcement going outside of that. What we don't have it as yet is kind of data to be able to talk to you about in terms of phase 4, because we're very early in the stages of that. Alongside that, we had really great feedback from our kind of user surveys from MindTools in terms of the number of people feeling that they were learning new skills at 92%, 85% of people saying it was having a positive impact on their performance. In phase 3, we got, again, positive feedback in terms of a really high net promoter score of +50, and also a very high rating of people saying MindTools is good and excellent. So overall, you can see that momentum is really building through the program that Randstad are working on. And as Jessica talked about, the aim for us is almost a phase 5 to have the kind of experience of the individuals enhanced even more through more personalization, through and recommendation through the platform itself of MindTools, which is what we're developing at the moment.
Sure.
Another really interesting factor is in terms of what kind of resource areas or themes were the most popular, and that has consistently remained as communication. And I'll hand back over to Jessica to give some more context as to why that's really interesting and positive for Randstad.
Yeah, and I would say that Michelle and I, when we were seeing this, were quite excited to see that communication was our #1 topic area. The reason being is, as an organization, we moved strategically away from performance reviews, and people and managers are having to develop more interpersonal skills. They need to increase the amount that they're coaching. So what are effective coaching techniques? They also need to be able to provide feedback to one another, whether it's an employee to manager situation or manager to employee. So we are hopeful and we were excited to see that communication was #1, because as an organization, strategically, it aligned to our initiatives as an organization. And so that was very refreshing for us to see that they're leveraging MindTools as well.
Great, thanks, Jessica. I guess I'm now going to wrap things up before we cover off some questions in terms of what are the key takeaways from today. So both Michelle and myself talked about the kind of context of learning, really, in that people are bringing significantly increased expectations to the workforce. People are expecting things to be shorter, on-demand, bite-sized, whatever phraseology you use, but a consistent theme that, as Jessica also said, we all have our mobile phones, at least one. I have 2 very near me right now. And the team at Randstad met this head on. They'd read about this lean learning from Slalom, which we'll share with you afterwards. And they had this focus on innovating in terms of their learning solutions that they provide. And really, that's fundamentally about meeting the learners where they are. And as we've seen on the journey we've gone on with Randstad, that as you do that more and you bring a more personal feel and a more customized feel to that, you see increased success. So it is not only kind of the theory that we've talked about, but the kind of reality we've seen in the journey as we've gone through the 4 phases. And Jessica talks about a great lesson learned there, particularly in terms of things moving so quickly within organizations and the way we have to interact with our employees, in that we need to make sure that the experience is as frictionless as possible. Jessica talked about single sign-on, but also she talked about the number of clicks through to a resource. And at MindTools, we do a huge amount of digital marketing work on both our B2B corporate business, but also our B2C business. And the rule of thumb is always, for every click, you lose about 50% of people. So if you think about how many clicks people take to get to the content you want them to learn from, if that every time they click, you're losing about 50% of people, it's hugely important to reduce the number of clicks. And finally, in terms of ROI, I think we all know that the importance of measuring this is huge, and it's an ongoing challenge for L&D. There are different ways of measuring this, and I think there's no single way to measure success. Michelle talked right at the start about what, as part of the business case, was wrapped up in the reduced travel time in terms of face-to-face training, more to a mixed online approach. But also in terms of, as Jessica was talking about, the link back to communication and that strategic focus. So it can be both quantitative and qualitative. But I think there is no single way of measuring success. So finally, I hope that's been useful. We wanted to answer some of your questions, and I will just skip across to what the questions are now to find some good examples. So, Jessica and Michelle, these are probably very heavily aimed at yourself. Let me find a great question here for you. There would be, I guess, a first question. Can you give us examples of some of the feedback that your learners have given in relation to this move to lean learning? Don't know whether Michelle or Jessica wants to take that.
Jess can do it.
Yeah, so overall the response has been pretty positive. One, for people to have content on demand, that they're able to access it. And also, I would say, as we are moving away from the in-person sessions and really flipping the classroom, we've received a lot of positive response around making the webinars that people attend more experiential and really not teaching on those webinars. So anytime that we can bring content outside and have them learn that before they go to the webinar, and we were able to shorten our webinars down. So all of that was very positive feedback. There are still some individuals that we've gotten feedback that miss the in-person sessions, but the majority of people do like our new approach in terms of having more time to do things on their own pace and not being so dictated to about when you need to get certain pieces done and join the webinar at this time. So a lot more freedom and flexibility has won over a lot of people. Michelle, anything that you would want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think it was actually our learning team that was the strongest hurdle to get over the fact that the traditional way that we were so proud of, and we really were proud. We had great training. It was a little bit difficult for ourselves to get through that, but we're really happy we did. What's the next question, Ollie?
There's another question which I think Michelle would probably maybe yourself could answer. I'm aware that you have a slightly younger kind of audience profile in terms of your workforce. So there's a question there: what particular type of content was most successful with your team?
So what particular content in terms of mind tools is that?
Oh, no, a particular type of content. I guess that could be mind tools, or that could be more widely. I think that's probably asking about formats.
Sure. Well, we're a global staffing and HR solutions company. So a lot of the content that we focus on is around communication, but also recruiting skills, account management skills, building business acumen. We worked with Mind Tools actually to create some customized paths right on our Mind Tools corporate landing page too. Things like language that we use, outperforming the market. So what was the content that was related to outperforming the market, building your business acumen, becoming a trusted advisor for our client services organization. Those are the things that were particularly aligned with the learning needs of our organization, our organizational strategy, and also the content that Mind Tools could provide.
Great, thank you. I guess one more question. I think it's literally just come in. What would you say was the most valuable thing you did to shift the balance between people's expectations and the provision from the L&D team?
So that's actually quite the journey that we're still on in terms of managing expectations. It's really just that. It's talking about what we are providing, not focused on what we used to do, and really showing people over time that they can have a more meaningful learning experience using the variety of tools that we're offering. It will take time. There's still a few people with a more traditional mindset, but we're having fun on the journey, aren't we, Jessica?
Yes, we are.
Fantastic. Well, that is our 30-minute slot up. I think more than anything, I'd like to say thank you to Michelle and Jessica for giving not just Mind Tools, but the audience the time today. I really appreciate it. It's been very interesting. There are lots of questions we didn't have the time to answer, but we will get back in touch with all those people. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye, everybody.